Hello, everyone. So, I'm going to invite our guests to speak. There's so many people. Wait, okay. Everyone should.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, welcome, everyone. So, we're just gonna wait a few minutes to let everyone come in. Welcome. Also, I'm currently streaming, and if anyone is in the chat on Twitch, could you please let me know if you hear me?
Should I go on Twitch? Wait,
Oh, okay, no, someone, yeah. Joker of Aces, thank you so much. Okay. So we'll just wait, like, I don't know, like 02 before leaving it to you,
Oh
Masa.
wow.
Yeah.
This is a big turnout. Is
Yeah.
this our biggest turnout? I think this is our biggest turnout. No?
Yeah, it is. Woo. Welcome, everyone.
Clearly, everybody wants to be programmers.
I mean, it is a cool job.
Yeah, why do you sound so surprised, Masao?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious.
How's the turnout on Twitch? Because I'm not there, so I just see the Discord turnout.
We have 3 lovely people. So our Twitch channel is mainly for like recording our events on Discord.
Okay.
But we should promote it more often. Oh, we have 7 people now.
That's awesome.
Oh, so nervous.
I wonder if some of the people here are like, you know what, I'm gonna go over to Twitch.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone to How to Break into the Industry Programmer Edition. I will leave to our moderator, Masao, to introduce himself and also our guest for today. Take it away.
Hello, my name is Masao. I'm a indie producer in Montreal working for Studio Cut to Bits. I've been in the games industry for almost 17 years. It's going to be 17 years in about a little over 2 months. I've worked both in AAA and indie, and I have been working with Catherine on the how to doing different kinds of indie focused roundtables for work with indies. And before that, we used to do it with the gameplay space in Montreal. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and hopefully we can help you have a better understanding of what it takes to get your first job in the games industry as a programmer. I guess we'll go alphabetically. Bobby, please introduce yourself.
Been working in AAA games for around 12 years now. I'm currently a programmer at Valve. Before that, I was at like EV Montreal, Warner Brothers Montreal, and IO Interactive in Denmark. Been mostly just moving around the world following my career. So that's the short of it for me.
Okay, let's see. Oh no, I don't actually know my alphabet. Is J before F or no, F is before J, right? No, F is
Yeah.
before J. So Fareha, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Fariha. I am a software engineer 1 at Electronic Arts in EA Sports. I have a feeling I'm going to be the one with the shortest amount of time in the gaming industry, and also I would say software, since it'll be my 1 year tenure here next month. For some background, I did do an internship with Electronic Arts Canada last year, which was an 8-month internship. But the team I'm on currently is different than my internship team. And looking forward to chatting with everyone. Oh, just as a side note, this I did a career change. So I didn't start in software or games. So it is possible to switch, and I'll pass it back.
Okay, Jack.
Hello, hello. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Jack. I've been in games 16 years, I think it's been. I'm currently a staff software developer at Unity. That's just another way of saying like senior developer. And it's yeah, I work in the characters and motion space, we call it. So that's been pretty much most of my career has been animation, physics, gameplay, and AI. Yeah, before Unity, I was working at Ubisoft Montreal for a long time. I worked with Bobby and Marcel there, and I've also worked at IDOS Montreal, at Rockstar North back in the day in Scotland. Yeah, and it's great to be here actually because I feel like I took maybe a slightly unusual route to games since I'm from physics too, so it wasn't a career change because I hadn't had a career in physics, but it's still not the traditional path. So
You studied astrophysics, right?
yeah, I did actually.
So
Cool.
we have an astrophysicist here who decided that he wanted to be a programmer instead.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I never got my bachelor's in astrophysics. I switched to computational physics in the last minute because I just loved coding too much.
Okay. I thought so. I've known Jack for like, I don't know, 10 years. So this whole time I thought he was an astrophysicist and he's been lying to me. So
That's
I'm
true.
very
I'm a
disappointed.
fraud. I'm a fraud.
So now that we're done with our introductions and my faith in Jack has been permanently shattered, let's move on to our questions. So let's start with education. So can you tell us what kind of educational background you have and what kind of education, and also in contrast, what kind of education uh, do you think someone who's trying to get into the games industry, uh, what kind of education would give someone the best odds of trying to get into the games industry? Let's start with Fareha, since you have just entered the industry. Um, what is your educational background, and would you recommend the same something similar or something different?
Sure. So in terms of my educational background, I so my first degree was a bachelor's in life sciences, cell biology, human biology, and at and then I was working, and it was while I was working that I came across an Intro to Python programming course, and eventually that decision led me to decide if I wanted to either do a boot camp or I wanted to go back to school. I was in Canada at the time. Um, and in Canada, from my brief research, and again, this decision is personal, everyone's decision varies. I also know how I study and learn. I realized that for me, going back to school would be better because I need the structure, I need the deadlines, I can self-learn, but my stamina is not there unless I have guidance. So my choice was to go back to school, and I did a bachelor's of computer science from Carleton University, and I finished that um, just at the end of 2021. So that is my educational background. Um, did I need that for games? So when I did my internship was involved working, like I worked with Java in my internship when I was working with when I was working with the team in Canada. In my current internship, for my current role, uh, I needed to have background in C++. So it wasn't necessary that I have experience with games because I'm in a new grad role. So I needed to be able to understand C++ and work with it and have some experience with that, which came from school, which going back was helpful because I did the bachelor's in computer science. Um, what kind of educational background for games and what will give you the best odds? That's a good question, and I think it's one of those answers that you can't say that this will definitely lead you. One option will definitely lead you to a road versus another option. It's it's ultimately the package. It's ultimately the package you present or your package that your prospective employer sees and what it is you're bringing. So just to use myself as an example, and I'm using myself as an example to come up with this answer as well. I I play games, but I don't play sports games, and I'm working in sports. So it wasn't it yeah, I don't think it was necessary to know the particular game I'm working on, like my particular sport, how it's played, or the mechanics of the sport, because I don't have that knowledge. Uh, I have like a desire to learn. I have a desire to grow. I did a career switch and I want to become a proficient developer, a proficient engineer, and understand the tools and technology and like the architecture that's used to build. For me, that can be games or it can be somewhere else, but so far I am enjoying games. So I think it's like the overall package that you bring, which includes your experience, which includes your personality. Because with companies, like with all companies, for that, and you should also look for that. Uh, so it's really the bundle, like your experience, your personality, your your aptitude or your willingness to learn, and I think everything, like if you have side projects and stuff, and I think that all that embellishes the packages you're bringing, the package you bring. Um, but I would certainly say it's you and the like when you're trying to promote your like market yourself.
Okay. Jack,
Yeah, I
I
really
guess.
agree with that. I think that's like thinking of it as a package. I think is a is a great way to think about it because I have a kind of similar-ish story because I got into games. I was studying astrophysics, like we talked about. I was doing a master's at Edinburgh, and astrophysics is funny because your laboratory is the universe. You can't actually do any experiments inside of it because all of the things are like light years away. So generally, you write simulations and do experiments with the simulations and observe the results. So basically, if you study astrophysics, you have to learn how to code. So they taught us Java, and I got really into writing these simulations. And in my fourth year, it was like a 5-year degree. There was this game competition in a city nearby in Dundee. It was like sponsored by university there that was really big on games, and that was great because like EA were partners there, and there were lots of like Rare would come up from England to look at the finalists and stuff like that. So me and some friends made a team and joined, and that's really what broke me into the industry. And I hadn't even finished my education that summer. Like I still had a year to go, but I got this job offer at the end of it from Rockstar North, who were shipping I think, GTA 4, and they needed people to push it over the line. So it was super lucky opportunity, and I was like, yes, I need to do this. And I spoke to my supervisor and was like, I've got to quit. Like this is just too good, you know. Um, so you know, I definitely think that education is some of it, but your portfolio and like what else you put on your CV, you know, like in my case, it was this kind of summer project with friends. Whatever proves that you're curious, you're passionate, you're you know you're willing to learn. You can learn new things because, like, say that summer, I had to teach myself C++ because I only knew Java. And when I was hired, like they knew I wasn't the world's greatest C++ programmer, but they trusted that, and when I say they, I mean like Rockstar trusted that I could grow, you know. Um, and now when I'm on the other side of the fence hiring at Unity, it's definitely what we look for. We look for good candidates that yeah, they need to have a baseline technical proficiency proven by a technical test and their education, but also the most important thing is like this willingness to learn, this kind of perceived like growth opportunity, you know, like where they're going to be in the future, because that's really what you're investing in when you hire someone. I hope that makes sense. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, in terms, like literally for the course to do, just do anything scientific that, or like computer science, any science, something with maths, you know, I mean, it all works.
Okay, Bobby, what did you study?
So I think I'm the only one that actually did like the standard route to some degree. I initially started studying computer engineering for 3 years before I decided like this wasn't really for me. So I grew up in South Africa and we didn't have a games industry. And when I entered college, like trying to work in games seemed like a far-fetched dream, like a pipe dream, like it was never going to happen. And so I figured I'd do something, you know, sensible at the time. I had Eastern Europe, you know, I'm Eastern European, so a lot of the whole like you have to be an engineer and blah blah blah, all that kind of shit. So I started with computer engineering. I then, after 3 years, decided that I wanted to get into games and I would switch to computer science. And then, worst case, if I failed, I would have a computer science degree, which isn't exactly a bad thing. And so I ended up doing 3 degrees in computer science. I was in university for a long time. I also worked for around a decade outside of games as a software consultant, software engineer, sort of an enterprise and the defense industry. So I've got 10 years outside of games and now 12 in games. The main thing that I think education-wise that you need, because hiring is also kind of different depending on seniority and the positions that you're applying for. At a junior level, I would definitely say having something like a computer science degree is a really good kind of safety net for two aspects. The first one being is that I find that sometimes there's a misconception about what university is. Some people think that once they finish university, now they're qualified to do the job, which really isn't the case because you don't have any experience, you're completely fresh, you have just some foundation of knowledge. But what university, to some degree, in my opinion, is supposed to do is it's not supposed to teach you how to do the job, it's supposed to teach you about all the aspects that you might need as part of the job and where to look up certain things. It's more about building up a knowledge base of saying, I know that these things exist and I know where to look for them afterwards. So doing a bunch of math courses is interesting, data structure courses, potentially some kind of abstract major that gives you a different perspective on things like GIS systems or physics or something like that, just to kind of broaden your kind of view of certain fields. And then afterwards, once you start working, you can always look that stuff up, but you have to know that that exists. And that's what university is sort of giving you. It's giving you that, hey, these are these algorithms. You might have forgotten them, but you know that they exist and you can look them up afterwards. To that point, there's been a trend over the last like decade of a lot of these sort of game schools that will promise to teach you how to do game programming in a year or some accelerated program like this. I would personally be a little wary of that, since a lot of the time what you end up doing is you kind of learn how to use an engine. Like they'll teach you how to hack together a game in a year in Unity or hack together a game in Unreal. And that's kind of doing a bit of a disservice to you, since you don't actually get a lot of the foundational knowledge you will need when you enter the industry, like the basics of data structures, like how an array works, what kind of different fundamental mathematical algorithms that we use constantly in games and that kind of stuff. You'll miss out on that. And the other point of like doing something more traditional is, I mean, I'm a little jaded and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but sometimes games can be a really rough career path. And at some point you might want to exit. And at that point, it's kind of good to have a backup plan, you know, to be like, well, maybe games isn't for me after like 5-10 years. And then you want to transition out something else. And that gives you the sort of like, at least the pass to get through an interview screen and saying, hey, I have a computer science degree, so I can introduce potentially an enterprise company or something else past that space. I hope that answers the question from my side of things.
No, I think that was an excellent answer, and I think we got three pretty different perspectives on the same question. So I think that was really good. So let's move on to our next question, which is how do you demonstrate that you can do the job for your first job in games? So obviously, there's different ways of doing that, but you know, most people who are applying for jobs that is not their first job, they basically say like, oh, well, I had this job before, so obviously I'm qualified to have this job that is similar. So if this is the first time you're getting into the games industry, you kind of have to get over that hurdle of like, okay, I've never worked in the games industry, but I should be able to do it. What are non-educational ways that that you can demonstrate that? Is it a portfolio? Is it doing game jam games? What do you think? Bobby, let's start with you since you were the last to go last time.
So what I ended up doing when I was trying to get a job, I was still in South Africa, right? And there was no industry at the time there. So what I did was, as part of learning, I started writing a technical blog. And so I wrote up whatever I was looking into at the time. I did a technical write-up because it was also helpful for me to kind of regurgitate it out because it helped me understand certain concepts in trying to explain them to others. And so I wrote up this sort of technical blog on like, hey, graphics programming or AI or whatever I was interested in at the time. And I wrote a set of DirectX tutorials back then because there wasn't any. And that was something that I sent along with my first resume. And I basically shotgunned every company I could think of at the time with an application. And that is a sort of a reference. Realistically, folks, when they're looking at interview resumes, I was doing a lot of the hiring at Warner and I did that a little bit at UB. But what people would look at is like, let me look at the profile, and if it's a junior, let me see what's on there. Listing something like a game jam or whatever is difficult as a programmer because it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you who worked on it. It's like most of the time when you're hiring, you don't have the time to spend 3, 4, 5 hours digging into like the game jam project, seeing what it does, whatever. Side projects can be similar in some way in terms of like, well, there's a massive amount of code. Now I have to try to look into it, which takes a lot of my time and it isn't technically my job. So usually the best way to kind of attract interest from an interview is having something that's easily parsable and easily visible. So for me, the tech blog was really useful because I could basically, on the other side, what they were doing is they were reading through my article and they'd pick one, they'd read through and say, okay, this makes sense. I can kind of see that this candidate has something interesting. They seem to understand certain concepts. They have an understanding of like the tech stuff. You know, it was a very fast path into showing that you have some knowledge and some prerequisite knowledge in those kind of things versus kind of expecting an interviewer to go through your game jam project. You know, sometimes you would get 100 resumes and I don't have time to go through 100 people's personal projects and those sort of things. But quickly browsing through a website of like a portfolio of like, you know, some technical musings is a really fast route to go down that route. And additionally, it's going to sound weird, but if you kind of do that, I don't know what the state of Twitter is these days. Like 6 months ago, I would have had a different answer. It's like going on Twitter, there's a lot of active game devs, like spamming the stuff out and sort of like, hey, I wrote this thing out, this and that, getting it spread, talking to other devs, that kind of thing. Building up a network in that route was really beneficial in terms of like initial visibility. I often do mentoring, and I've had a few people poke me and say, hey, I'm working on a similar problem to you, or I'm interested in this thing that you're dealing with. Like, do you mind doing a call? Do you mind like chatting with me, whatever? And then we would talk and I could potentially connect them with other companies in their area that might be looking for somebody and those kind of things. So I would say like, if you want to build up a portfolio as an artist, that makes sense. As a programmer, I don't think it's that relevant. Most of the time, going through an interview screen, they're going to look at your educational background and potentially once you make it past that kind of bar, hopefully HR isn't that restrictive and they'd send it through to the team. And then the team will look through quickly and, nobody's going to recode, frankly. If you have a nice, fast way to show that, hey, I understand certain things, or I've covered certain topics, or I've achieved a certain thing and write it up, that I think is more beneficial.
Okay, Freya.
Hello. So how do you demonstrate you can do the job for your first job in games? I'm going to, so the way that I ended up in electronic arts and games in general was through networking. And I know that somebody asked this in the thread as well, that how do you network? And gaming was not on my radar. When I was studying, I knew I wanted to get good experience. I wanted to build and I wanted to learn, because ultimately, if you're learning and you know the kind and you know how you like you understand the way that you yourself learn, then you can I believe that you can end up in whichever industry you want to aspire for. Ironically enough, I wasn't aspiring for games. I just wanted a really good opportunity to learn. So the way that I found EA was through a conference. And if you're in school, then your local university comp sci club will probably send you invites to conferences that are happening locally or non-locally, and maybe they're happening virtually. You have to do the work to show up to those, and you have to do the work to go out and meet recruiters, make those connections, at the same time learn about their their line of work, their sorry, not the individual's line of work, I meant the business, the industry, and build a relationship and mention that you're interested in working with them. And I'm assuming that, you're really interested in working with them, and keep in touch with them. Um, because it's those relationships that you don't know where they will lead you. So I came across EA at a conference for women, and that's pretty much how my EA journey started. Of just finding out that there were roles open, when they were open, applying to them, mention what I was interested in. You don't know which opportunities will lead you there. So I would say that in order to look for opportunities, and you don't have if you're not in school and you don't have access to, if let's just say if you're switching careers, or if you're in a boot camp, or if you're looking for other resources outside of the content, outside of the information that comes from your local comp sci club, you can always attend events on LinkedIn. I'm not much on Discord or Twitter, so but like, for example, this panel here right now, this is happening through Work of Indies, and you're meeting people who are working through industries. But there's so many groups and events you can attend virtually now. It's really just a matter of uh, going out, making those connections, and finding out about opportunities, and you don't know which one will land where. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about differentiating yourself, and having something on your CV that will stand out and show what sort of person you are. So I kind of agree and disagree with you, Bobby, that like game jams aren't so important. Like I think things like that and group projects, they do tell you something about the person, but I completely agree that I'm not going to go and download the code and look into the Git commit history and figure out what you coded and all of that. Like that's not going to happen at all, but it might help you get your foot in the door, I think. And I think having a computer science degree or any of these degrees, it shows you, yeah, you can learn programming, but you also need to show that you can work in a team, and that you're curious, and these kind of things. So personally, I really like it when I see that people have done these kind of extracurricular things on the CV, because it depends on your market, I guess, and your geography, what's happening in your city. But here, I'm in Montreal. It's really competitive, and if someone applies just out of university with a computer science degree and that's it, like they're probably not going to get an interview. That's the truth. Like, so you need that extra something, whether that's like the tech blog, great idea, game jams, group projects, competitions. And yeah, like I got into games through a competition, and we hosted one at Ubisoft Montreal as well. And they're really good because you often have industry professionals come in at the end to say be judges or be mentors. And if these programs exist in your city, I would highly recommend them because that's also a networking opportunity, right? So people will walk around the kind of show floor. They'll get to know you. They can instantly see like which teams have got a good dynamic, which teams are really creative, and this can just help tell the recruiters like something a bit extra about you, which would really help you to get that interview.
Kind of extending on that idea, the programmer that's in our studio, Tommy, actually got his job through a game jam competition that Ubisoft hosted. His team won the competition that year, and pretty much everybody on his team got multiple job offers from various studios within the city. So especially competitions that are sponsored by gaming studios have a lot of recruiters and game devs that are paying attention to it. So that is a really good way to get the attention of people who are currently making games.
I was also, Masao, I was also just going to add hackathons. If you have a chance to also join a hackathon, that also adds to that also adds to like the package that you're going to be presenting to your future employer. But hackathons are another way that you can, depending on what the theme of the hackathon is, you can even make games at those hackathons.
Yeah, totally. And if I can like build on that, I mean, it's improving your portfolio, but it's also giving you experience, like soft skill experience, let's say, and that will be grilled in the interview. And that's a huge part of interviews these days. Like the Unity interview process is like multi-stage. There's like a panel and there's many rounds, and I'd say like more than half of the interview process isn't technically focused. It's more about values. It's trying to figure out like what sort of person you are, and um, how well do you work with others? Like, do you have high amounts of empathy? Are you respectful? Are you humble? And these kind of things. Um, it's you'd often be able to prove that through experience. So if you can tell stories about how you worked in the game jam or in the competition or in the hackathon, or how you helped out this indie project, or how you met these people at your meetup and they needed someone to do this thing and blah blah blah. It's those stories that will actually get you hired, for sure.
I had a third question, but the second question kind of bled into the third question. So I think we may, I guess let's talk about networking, since I think that was something that was kind of touched upon, but not necessarily exclusively discussed. Let's see. So I think everybody else has gone first. So I think Jack, you can be the person that goes first. What in your opinion are good ways to network, and what are things to keep in mind when you are networking in these opportunities?
That's a good question, especially since I'm kind of introverted when I could do these things. But I think, like, I mean, if you're out there trying to meet people, first of all, where you're going to go, I guess we talked about like meetups, game jams, hackathons. So let's say you're in one of those places, you're talking to people. I think just ask lots of questions, be curious, and be humble. I think that's my advice. I know a guy I went to university with. He was a few years older than me. He's doing a PhD in AI, and he wanted to work in games at the time. I think I'm not sure he does anymore, but I remember I helped an introduction. I invited him to like an event, and I introduced him to like the lead AI programmer at Rockstar at the time. And his approach was I think he was wanting to impress, but his approach was to kind of basically shit on a lot of the state of game AI and, especially open world AI, and say how bad it is and how we should be doing things totally differently. And, and I think his heart was in the right place, in that he was trying to say, oh, I could bring all this knowledge to the games industry, but, it didn't come off super well. So I'd say, like, being humble and acknowledging that you've got a lot, like everyone has a lot to learn, like myself included, is really important. So just try and be a good person, and don't come across as a dick, basically, is how I would suggest. Sorry, is that PG-13, Masao? Did I do it wrong?
I think that's PG-13. Catherine's the judge on that.
Yes,
but,
yes, we can swear in this house, no problem.
Okay, Bobby.
So the
Where
networking,
to network and how to network and what to do and not to do.
it was easier before the whole Twitter debacle. Twitter was a really good spot for that. A lot of game devs are there. They're vocal. They reply. You can have interactions, and you can build up a rapport with them. Over time, where you can kind of just chat with them, reply to their tweets, especially if it's like industry related stuff. That was a really nice thing. To Jack's point, definitely the humble, don't be a dick aspect applies. One thing that I've seen in the past, and it's happened to me on the receiving end, is somebody will poke you and say, hey, I'm interested in, like, I'm always open to like mentoring or networking or helping folks out if I can. I really believe in the kind of pay it forward mentality. Like, I got some help when I was starting out and I want to like pay that forward. But then like people will tend to abuse that sort of, it's not generosity, but like they'll tend to abuse that initial like conversation where I'll start getting spammed and it becomes almost a full-time job to answer every random question over the space of 2-3 weeks that they might have, or they would ask me how I would potentially do certain things. I'd give them advice and then they would start arguing back about it. And I'm like, okay, it's like, I don't have the time to have that sort of a conversation with like 10 people. And it's like, for the most part, it's mostly like chat with people, treat them as peers, like in terms of like, you don't need to, they're not on a pedestal. Definitely don't do that. Chat with them normally, human being level. You never know what that might turn into or result in. It's a relatively small industry at the end of the day. That's the other thing to be aware of. It's like that situation that Jack described could very easily backfire if now that person gets a reputation. GDC is a good venue for that sort of thing. But the problem I found with GDC is that the cost is absolutely prohibitive for a lot of people. And additionally, it tends to be relatively cliquey. So if you don't know the right folks, you won't get into the right kind of circles to some degree. If they are local meetups, those would be kind of good. Just again, sort of with the game jams and the hackathon kind of thing, it depends the people that are there. I tried to run a Montreal like tech meetup where I wanted a variety of folks from AAA, from indies, from people that were interested to kind of come in and kind of mingle and get to know each other. But a lot of those events also tend to kind of not be clicky, but sort of have an isolation of it's just indie folks or it's just like AAA folks or whatever else. And so it can be hard to break those boundaries. So my best bet is just go on Twitter. LinkedIn's also a good one. I've gotten a lot of messages on LinkedIn from folks being like, hey, I saw something you did and I want to chat to you about blah, blah, blah. So LinkedIn, Twitter, try interact with folks, try build up a relationship with them, and yeah, just treat them as any other person. You know, they're not special in any way. So don't go in there with this sort of like, what's a good word, like putting somebody on a pedestal, or kind of like when I was starting in games, I always thought everybody working in games were these like superstar rock stars kind of thing, and that did me a disservice in the beginning. You know, where it's just better just to be casual with folks and see how they react to that. That makes sense.
I think generally everyone wants to be treated like a real person. You know, I think I'm echoing kind of what Bobby and Jack are saying, and this is I think this is just generally true when you're meeting someone. Um, you know, people want other people to be nice to them, and people want people to treat them like you know, a regular person. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind when you are networking. I've had people like argue with me about like game design decisions on games where I've worked on, and I'm like, I don't want to argue with you. Like, I have no desire to do this, you know, and chances are that had nothing to do with what I do. So yeah, don't do that. Freya.
I was trying to think if there's anything else I can contribute, but I think I agree with a lot of what has already been said. To be honest, at one point I was going to say that maybe try to be the person that you yourself would want to talk to, but then I realized, well, maybe that's not a good analogy, because maybe you are already trying to do that, and maybe some people might find it overwhelming and others may not. But yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on top of that, other than the fact that like because I use LinkedIn more than the other platforms like Discord or Twitter or Twitch. It's the platform I've always used the most. Some cold messaging can also work. I've sent a few cold messages in the past as well, because you know there was something about a company that I read, and then I found a recruiter and I said, hey, I'm interested in applying for this company because you know I actually follow the CTO, and I think a lot of the stuff that he's doing is great. Can we have a chat? And that just uh, became like a conversation, and then that turned into a hey, we're actually hiring. So cold messaging can work. Um, if it works, try not to, as others have said already, that try not to encumber or bombard that person, because you know that's not the only thing that they're doing. It's understandable that you're really looking for an opportunity, but you know, like, give it some space, and it's like what everyone has said, try to treat it with try to treat that relationship as respectfully as possible and as humanly as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess let's wrap up with listener questions. Catherine,
Hello. Okay.
give us questions.
Okay, so I will start from the beginning. If the question has already been answered through conversation, please let me know. So, Amy Potato, I've worked professionally with Java, C++, Objective-C. I'm really curious what level of C++ is generally required to get into games programming. Are interviews as technical as traditional software engineering roles?
This one varies very much between company to company. Some companies will have technical tests, and some companies will even have technical tests per level. So juniors will get a different test to a senior. or sometimes they will skip the technical tests for seniors directly and do only a sort of like a phone screening. At an entry level, the basic understanding of the language is pretty much mostly what you'll be asked. Trying to understand for C++ specifically, it'll be stuff like, do you understand how memory works? Do you understand the basics of like polymorphism? Do you understand some of the basic like standard library containers and such? Most companies won't use those, but it's a good interview question to kind of just on an algorithmic standpoint, see if you can, understand why would you use something, what are the implications, those sort of things. They generally are not very trick questioning. It's relatively straightforward. That said, the problem with interviewing is it's not a science. It's always like the people that ask you questions afterwards. Hope if you get a good interviewer, they're not going to try to like, what's the word? They're not going to try to trip you up. What they're going to do is try to figure out what do you know, what don't you know, and more importantly, how do you react to things that you don't know? And that's for me, on the flip side of an interview, has been super interesting where I'll hit on something that the candidate doesn't understand or doesn't know. And there's usually two routes they can take. They can say, I don't know this, how does it work? Or, yeah, I don't have an idea, can you explain to me, whatever, which for me is a really good sign because I don't expect people to know everything. I expect people to like say, this is an area that I just don't have any experience. How does it work? I'm curious, let me discuss that. Or you get the route where they start waffling or they try to bullshit you. Don't do that route. Usually it's not a good idea. Rather just be upfront and say, hey, I don't know this. And a lot of times, to Jack's earlier point, is like, we're looking to hire people with potential more so than people that know everything. Right? We want to hire good people that can work with others, that have growth potential, and that, if they don't know anything interview, I don't care. But if they're like eager to learn, humble, know what they don't know, can ask for help, that kind of thing, that for me is super beneficial. So I wouldn't worry too much about the language competency past like the most basic level, if that makes sense. It's a long-winded way to say not much.
That's good stuff. Thank you. I will
I just
really.
wanted to,
Oh, yes, please.
I just wanted to add to Bobby's comment. I agree with everything that was said. I will also say to the person who asked the question about what level of C++ do you need to know, I would say if it's apply for the opportunity, and because you're not gonna, it's a fact that we don't all succeed at all the shots that we take. There are a lot of failures that eventually will lead you to success. And one of the things I personally have learned is that in the interviews that I have failed, and I was thinking, oh no, I didn't answer this question properly, I would try and write down what that concept is that I didn't know and keep track of that and maybe read it or look it up right away so that it doesn't haunt me the next time. It could haunt me. Hopefully I'll be a bit more prepared. And it's through all those failures too that you can pick up what you can get a sense of what is it, how is it that interviews are conducted and what is being asked. And you will be surprised one day that, all the things that you failed in previous interviews probably just come in one interview and you actually pass that interview. And that happened to me. So I would say still take your shot if you have the opportunity to interview and you're worried about how much you don't know or know.
Beautiful.
I just want to
Yeah, go ahead.
those answers. And on the topic of like what you actually need to know with C++, I think I really think it's really just an understanding of what's going on inside the computer, underneath. And I think sometimes if people have, say, only been coding in C# because they use a lot of Unity, or maybe Java at university or whatever, and they haven't really gone deep and understand like, okay, what's the lifetime of these objects? Like, where are they allocated in memory? The difference between stack and heap memory, and understanding what pointers do, what the difference between pointer and reference is, and passing by value, and all of these things. Like, they will be tested in technical tests for sure. So, they're like the C++ basics that you should know. But on the topic of programming tests in general, is they're mostly designed to be not 100%ed, I would say, in all the companies I've worked at. It's like, you might be getting the same test as a junior that a senior would also be given, right? Not all the time, but it can happen. So it's important to not panic if you can't answer everything. And just like Bobby said, you probably have the opportunity to work through the problem with the interviewer later. And how you react in that situation is going to be really telling. So, don't feel like, oh, I've already failed this interview because I only answered 2/3 of the questions. That's usually not true at all.
Yeah, and I will say something like, when I was starting to look for a job, I was completely fresh, had no experience in games, and I did an interview with Crytek, and the interviewer decided that that was the day that he was going to show off how smart he was. And it hit me pretty hard at the end of that interview. I was in not a good state, pretty much a mess, and thinking like, oh, this will never happen. I don't know what I'm doing, completely clueless, this and that. Don't let that sort of stuff discourage you. To what Fariha said is, take that as a learning opportunity and saying like, initially I had a couple of, like a day or two of like, okay, like this whole thing was a disaster. This will never happen. What do I do next? But then I came back and said, okay, like all these things that they grilled me on, let me look them up, let me learn, let me, do that. And that's a super important thing. But like, you shouldn't let some asshole just like ruin potentially your future in some ways like that. So I know it's hard, it's easier said than done, but keep that in mind, that just because you have a really horrible interview with maybe a bad person, it doesn't mean they're all going to be like that. And so kind of just try to, what's the expression, the water off a duck's back with some of this stuff.
Thank you. That was really, really good. So we only have 8 minutes, so I'm just gonna take a random questions. I'm really sorry if we cannot answer everything today. But one question that stood out to me was, how do you pitch yourself to game dev jobs if the software you use is seen as second class versus industry standard or most preferred software?
I can take that. I think it builds off what Bobby was saying about learning. No one really cares about your knowledge of a specific software. They care about the fundamentals, I think. So I don't know what software you might be talking about, if it's a game engine or something, but I mean, my experience when I applied was like with Ogre, which is like one of the world's worst ever engines. Well, sorry, it's an open source engine, so I'm not mean to offend anyone, but it has no investment, right? And this was like 16 years ago. So I mean, what tools you use are just a vessel to demonstrate your ability to problem solve, and there's always constraints in the games industry, so working within constraints is interesting. I wouldn't sweat it. I wouldn't let that stop you to build, like what Faria said, like take your shot. Don't think, oh my God, I've only been coding using this little game engine that no one's heard of, so I'm too embarrassed to show my stuff. Like, don't think that. Just believe in yourself and go for it.
Actually, along that topic, a lot of game studios use in-house engines, which means that their expectation is that you have zero experience with that. So, that is something to keep in mind.
And on programming side, it's easy. It's like, if you know how to use Visual Studio, you're mostly going to be fine. There's not many tools that we use outside of like a version control system, our IDE, which in games is pretty much Visual Studio. What else, Jack, do we need potentially tool-wise as a programmer? Or Fariha, what tools did you guys have to learn to work in games?
I'm using the predecessor of GitHub, or Git, I guess, Perforce. So I had to learn that.
Yeah. So I think that part's actually easier for us. We don't have too many tools. It's not like an artist that, has years of experience in like Max and now has to go to Maya Studio or something like that.
Yeah,
Even
like,
then, that's not the end of the world. Like people can learn. If you can learn on one tool, you'll be able, like, it's not going to be fun, but you'll be able to learn on other tools.
If you use Vim, then that tells you a lot about yourself.
Jack's trying to be really controversial now.
That's it. I'm gonna say I don't use Vim. Not saying there's a problem with it. It's just like, there's left-handed people, there's right-handed people.
And then there's people that are wrong.
I didn't say that. But yeah, no one's going to be caught up on what tools or what SDK you've used or whatever, I think. Did you use the right tool for the right job? That's the question.
Yeah. So can I take one last question? Is anyone limited with time right now? Bobby, Jack, Rahia?
I'm good.
I can stay on for another question, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
So I have one here. What do you think would be good ways to present work on a portfolio site that doesn't require downloading the game or diving into code? A list of features you implemented, a description of your architecture, techniques, videos of your code in action, etc.
Honestly, probably just a write-up of like problem definition, what I was trying to solve. How did I go about solving it within the context of the engine or whatever? And basically some screenshots of like little code snippets or pseudocode or something. Basically like a layman's explanation of what was I solving? How did I solve it? What were the pros and cons of my solution kind of thing. I think that'll be like invaluable to basically show that not only did you solve something, but you also like thought about the implications of your solution, not just, hey, I solved it, move on.
Yeah, I think having videos of, like, if it's games, then it's usually visual, the things you've done. So, I like it when people send CVs or on their LinkedIn, they have a link to a simple website or whatever with some videos. I personally don't think many people are going to read your code. That's asking a lot. I don't think you could really judge someone by just skipping through their Git necessarily. But yeah, it's just generally what sort of areas have you been working in, what interests you, what problems are you trying to solve. I think that's interesting. Yeah, and keep it short. Like, no one's gonna spend more than a couple minutes looking around that. So, don't have like a 20-minute lecture on whatever it is. It needs to be very short and sweet.
Was the question like how I was typing an answer in the chat? Was the question like how to best demonstrate something that you've worked on, Catherine?
Yes, so it's more about like what do you show in a portfolio? Oh my god, sorry. Okay, that's the food, that's the cat food dispenser. So the question was about like what do you kind of showcase in a portfolio without like them downloading or like showing code.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Bobby and Jack.
Okay, I think that's it.
Yeah.
There is somebody who mentioned that they had 2 questions that did not get answered. Rani, R-A-N-Y. I just saw that message.
Mm. Who? Sorry, I'm checking. So we unfortunately don't have time for any more questions, but our guests are free to answer questions in their own time if they want to. But this will wrap up our event for today. Any last inspiring words for our audience? Bobby, you're first.
Well, for me as well. Honestly, I think just repeating is like shoot your shot. Don't get discouraged, and just reach out to folks. If anybody wants to reach out about some technical stuff or whatever, like I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, just poke me. I think that's kind of it.
I will add on that keep an open mind. You know, if you keep an open mind, it also is a way to have a, you know, like a healthier mindset and hopefully a happier mindset. Personally, I found that when I was very focused on getting something specifically, and if I didn't attain it, that typically meant that I would feel upset, I would get depressed, and it's just, you just don't feel so great or confident in yourself. And when I started to take on the mindset of, you know, being more open to like being open-minded and trying out things, taking my shots, it doesn't work out, but you know, over time you build up this resilience to being like, it's okay, like I'll just keep trying. And also just, it's like a couple of the panelists have mentioned that there are some people that, you know, it's just not the right day that you met them. So don't take it personally and just focus on yourself and believe in yourself. And, you know, somebody else just might be having a totally off day. I also had an experience like that with an interview. And, you know, it takes some time to realize that it's not you, but yeah, just do you and trust in yourself.
Yeah, it's hard to add anything more than those wise words, but yeah, I mean, just get out there. Just like the biggest blocker to you getting the job is yourself, I think, and that's like everyone who worked in the games industry, they had to do this one time, and it's a big industry and there's lots of opportunities out there. So I think like um, just just take take the leap.
Yeah.
I also want to add that so please be kind to yourself. Like it is a difficult industry to break into. There's a reason there's a bunch of people in this roundtable, is
Mm-hmm.
because like it's not easy, and unfortunately there's no like a magical thing that you could do to just you know get a job tomorrow. Um, so, try to be kind to yourself when you don't get that job or when you don't get that call back. And also something to keep in mind is that as an industry, majority of the people who are working in the industry are um, have not been working in the industry for very long and have not and a lot of them have not been professionals for the very long compared to other industries because of the nature of our industry, which means that people who are interviewing you, especially as a junior, you could be talking to someone who has been interviewing someone for less than a year because they've only been in the industry for, let's say, like 3 or 4 years. They're not going to be the best at conducting interviews either. And so, remember that they're trying to kind of figure it out and learn what they're doing on their side as well. So um, keep that in mind and try to relax and you know, take one step at a time, because
Mhm.
we're all trying to do a good job, and we're all trying to learn what we are trying to do the best we can.
Can
Heck
I say
yeah.
one last thing? Because Masao, you
Sure.
brought something out that's super important. Remember that interviews are bi-directional. They go both ways. That's not just an interview of them on you, it's you on them as well. So sometimes it's actually good to be a bit picky. And something to keep in mind is when you're interviewing, and if you get to a point where they may make you an offer or something, a very important thing to ask them is, do they have somebody to help you grow? Will you have a mentor? Will you have seniors available to learn from? Be very careful of going into a company where it's a very junior team, because there's a good opportunity that you might end up having to figure everything out on yourself under time pressure and those sort of things. Um, if you have the opportunity to maybe take a less fancy job or something a little bit less title wise or money wise, but you have the opportunity to learn from experienced people, that will pay for itself in the future, rather than jumping into something a bit fancy immediately and then sort of being dumped into the deep end on your own. That can be really rough on people, and it's just not worth it in the long run.
Beautiful. Okay, so I will end the event now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bobby, Jack, and Fariha, and thank you, Masao. One last question for everyone is that if you would like to have one of these, we do these monthly. So if you have a discipline in particular that you would like us to go over, please let us know in the event chat so that we can think about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting. This
Bye.
was great.
Well, thank you.